What's up, guys? WhoNeedsMeta here. Welcome back to Retro Report. We're going to be going over RBET number 4, really Blackwing Edison tournament. Um, it
That's
happened.
basically what it was.
There, there are only, I believe, 8 unique decks in the top 24 here. Only 8 different decks, including Cadigan right here. Zydalos, aka Cadigan. I guess we did see 20 Blackwings and 17 Value Turbos. So it was heavily dominated by those two decks, by Blackwing style decks, and then the top 4 was entirely Blackwing and Vayu. So something to keep in mind here as we're going through some of these lists. We had 197 players, which is actually really cool. Again, all Blackwing, so we're going to see Royal Oppression maxed out at 2 in every single deck, which to me is kind of a response to all of the zombie decks that have been doing well, because that deck just can't deal with oppression. So we also did see a lack of Gladiator Beasts and Diva Hero in the top cut. So that's an interesting thing to note. I think the Frog Hero deck is almost virtually replaced Diva Hero as a deck that doesn't need to run like bricks and things like that. So
Yeah, I'm surprised. There's still a lot of favoritism towards Diva Hero, I guess, just because it has a lot of. It's just fun to people, but it definitely fell off for this tournament.
that, and like this deck can get into deck dev super easy. And if you're seeing frogs everywhere, it's a super easy deck to just kill all their guys, kills all the divas and stuff like that. So having access to deck dev can really, I don't know. There's a reason this happened essentially, but we're gonna kind of go over just the first 2 lists, and then we'll go over some of the other lists that we liked. Other decks that saw a lot of representation was, again, Diva Zombie, which makes a lot of sense. It's been doing well. It does very well online. 10 GBs, none of which made the top 24. 9 Hero Beat, 9 Lightsworn. We did see some of the top 24. 9 Quickdraw Plants. Again, this is another very popular deck. 7 Dragon Turbo. We did see also make the top cut. A 7 Diva Hero, which we did not see. And then 5 Machina Gadgets, which, again, we didn't see either. And then a lot of stuff that isn't going to make more than 5 players. I mean, it's interesting that they decided to not decipher between Quick Draw Plants and Volcanic Quickdraw, because we see there's 4 Volcanic Quickdraw players as well as the 9 Quickdraw Plants. So there is a distinction that they made here. Obviously, the most popular side deck card, of course, is going to be DD Crow. You even see it in a lot of main boards. Some main boards are main decking them outright for game 1, searchable off Sangan. So if you need to be able to out something, it's good to go grab a Crow. And then Cyber Dragon, probably only not surpassing Crow because the card's semi-limited. And Dust Tornado being your top 3. Light Imprisoning Mirror is super interesting to see, being the 4th most sided card, because it does hit Light Swarms, but it also hits Fairy, which deck dev also hits when you're sitting with Blackwing. So this is not a good event to be a Fairy player, which is probably good that there are very few of them. And then, of course, being the most popular main deck card being Caius and Bottomless, which actually surprised me a little bit.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Heavy Storm, just about everybody, 197 players, 177 Heavy Storms. So only 20 players opting to not main deck it, and I'm sure most of the rest sided it. So we'll kind of hop into the list, unless there's anything you wanted to talk about here going into it.
No, nothing before we get into it. Although just combing over the deck type representation, there's some real funny ones that didn't make it onto that list. Like there's a clown control player in here.
Is there really a clown?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
I'd love that list.
I would also love to get a hold of Clown Control, because we played that in 2002 and it wasn't even good there.
But yeah, nothing.
Yeah, one final countdown, one Clown Control. I would like to see if anti-meta, I don't know. It's kind of cool. They have listed as 1 Dark Gaia Turbo, which there were more than that, even in, like, we have, and then 3 Dark Turbo.
Yeah, they I don't think that was the quote unquote evil hero deck. There's the 4 evil hero decks. Then there's that 1 Dark Gaia Turbo deck. I'm pretty sure those are the same.
Okay, so
at least
hero.
Fundamentally, maybe the Dark Gaia deck just eschewed Malicious Fiend and was all rockin' fiends. I don't know what the list was, but there was a few different varieties of it.
All right, so first place, Raikoko with Vayu Turbo. It's a pretty standard list. Again, we're going to be taking advantage of cards like Royal Oppression. It's just very good. We're not seeing any like Elfins or some of the other weirder cards that some of the other Blackwing lists have done well with, or some of the other value lists have done well with. Only 2 Caius. You only see 1 deck Devastation Virus on the side, which is pretty interesting. Again, here's that main decked Crow that we're talking about. Card is good in the main board. 1 Hamster to support the 3 Raikos. And then in the sideboard, we're seeing 1 Kaiku for the mirror, which is really good, and then 1 copy of Thunder King. Obviously, this deck can support a tribute monster like Vanity's Fiend when you want to swap out the Caiuses for going first. Caius is obviously just a more balanced card, but if you're going first and you can plop this out there in certain matchups, it's very good. Or if you could play both.
I'd be curious to ask Raikoko how well all of the one-ofs did in his sideboard, like how consistently they were able to see them. Because there's a lot, like the 1 Nobleman, the 1 Deck Dev, the 1 Rug, the 1 T-King, Kaiku.
Vortex.
Yeah.
Crow being the second copy, but still only 1.
Right.
Oh. It's a pretty standard list. Nothing too out of the ordinary. There are a few out of the ordinary techs here in the second place. Kirsch's Blackwing list. This was your first or second loss? First loss, right?
No, yeah. Crush sent me to losers in round 5.
Okay, so this was because you lost the Dark Eruption.
He did Dark Eruption into Kalut, which was a pivotal interaction at one point of the game.
It was exact game. I remember it was Bora and Kalut for 31 right. Exact.
That was that was the nail in my coffin, actually.
Yeah, so other than that, he's only playing 1 copy of Vayu, which is interesting to grab off of Shura, or obviously you can just discard it. But it is interesting to see only 1. Typically you see 2 or 3. I think there was the other list that was like 3rd or 4th, I believe 4th place, played 3, if I remember correctly. He played Deep Prison over Bottomless. He maxed out on it, which is kind of cool.
And then didn't side the Bottomlesses, which was interesting to me too.
I think with 3 copies of Icarus Attack, you don't necessarily need to respond. There's not like a summon, because like you can still Ick Attack in the summon response window, but cards that can't be destroyed, like Stardust, Deep Prison handles them a little bit better. If your opponent is going to be greedy and attack with a Swap Frog, you can Deep Prison it and things like that. So that does make sense to me to see the 3 copies of Deep Prison and no copies of Bottomless. He did side deck a full 3, pulling the rug for those Frog decks, as well as the deck devs. I'd be interested to see how the compulsives worked out, what matchups this came in. Probably Vayu, because it's chainable and really good. And he opted to play Gaianite over Urukizas, but there are a decent amount of 6s in here. So, and then you have the 5s, of course, for the when you target Kalut.
Yeah, this straight up Blackwing doesn't really need Urquiza since you have Armed Wing and you can make it properly. It's just better.
Yeah. So you don't need it. So it's interesting to see Gaianite though. So, which is pretty cool. We're gonna go over to another top 8 list. Gory Vegas format is like the full name on like Dueling Book. Kind of cool. He had the triple fader. Interesting to see. We were watching one game and he actually left these in against Dragon Turbo with the Drago. So we were surprised to see that because that deck can put out Drago to stop cards like this and Gores and Trag. They would typically leave that in. So it's interesting to see that he did fader in that matchup. So got away with playing against Drago. The junk synchrons in the main board are pretty interesting.
And 3 of them.
Especially because there's 3 of them. I understand that it gives you access to level 5s and 6s, which is pretty cool. He even played double Catastor and triple Vanity's Fiend in the sideboard, but didn't put deck dev, even though he gave himself deck dev targets, along with the cards like Caius. I believe Dark Dust Spirits in Earth, though, so he can't target that.
Yeah.
But still, it's weird that Dark Dust Spirits in Earth. And he also played a copy of Zaborg, which gives you access to level 8s with Junk Synchron, as well as Mistworm when you have either a Fader on board, a Substitoad, or one of your 2 Treeborn Frogs. So you can have access to Mistworm to like clear boards, go for game, especially with things like Dark Armed. And then Jinzo's kind of cool in the main board. You didn't side any copies. Typically, you'll see like 2 Jinzo in the side, but having 1 in the main, especially in a deck that did play at least a couple trap cards, I know that really old traditional Frog Monarch decks would play like one at most, or the very common. It was like one Scapegoat, one Wing Blast, one Raigeki Break, which I've
Oh
seen
yeah,
to be pretty common because you can Scapegoat with Substitute.
that is a very strong interaction if you're able to pull it off, especially since he ran all 3 dupe.
Yeah, and then yeah, because you have more targets for Junk Synchron, which is weird because in a deck where that gets absolutely shredded by not shredded by Crow, but like I guess shredded by Soul
It's
Release.
more soul release.
Soul Release, because they have to have 2 Crows to get rid of both, which it begs the interaction of do I leave one in deck so if my opponent tries to Soul Release me, I still have one, or do I send both so if they Crow me I have the other. It leads to kind of guessing games. 2 upstarts, which is pretty interesting. And then your second loss. This was your second loss of the day. So both of your 2 losses made top 8. But you opened Fossil Dyna, and he went Soul Exchange, Vanity's Fiend, and couldn't do anything.
Yeah, that was GG's from there. I had a bunch of tribute monsters and no way to get them on board. Thoroughly stomped by Gwari.
Yeah. It was kind of a steamroll, but we saved all the replays and stuff. And then 2 copies of Twister in the side I like instead of Dust Tornado, which is pretty interesting. To hit like floodgate cards, possibly skill drain. But this deck doesn't really struggle that much with oppression.
Not with Treeborn, yeah.
Yeah, because of Treeborn, so.
And I don't think people would keep it in just for Junk Synchron.
Yeah.
So he probably gets away with it for free.
Typically. And then we're gonna move on here to
one thing I'll point out about that list before we move completely past it is there's no sided Light and Darkness Dragon, and there's no enemy controllers, and some other things that people have considered staple, which I find quite interesting also.
It is weird to see not a single copy of Econ. You'd usually think that as a 3 of to combo with your Treeborn Frogs. But it is kind of fragile, especially like people are side decking Burial to put the frogs back. And the fact that you can do it in draw phase because it's a quick play and then trigger the Treeborn after you do it. So if you draw it, play it, you get your Treeborn Frog back.
Yeah. It's just interesting.
Which is...
All right, moving on.
Moving on, yeah. This is a Volcanic Quickdraw, and we were really interested... What's up?
I said this deck Fox.
Yeah, we're pretty interested about the triple rocket accelerator package and no planes in the main board outside of the Dandelions, and we moved the Lone Fires and the Titanials to the sideboard, which is fairly interesting. It makes for a more streamlined experience. I feel like your play lines aren't going to diverge too hard. You're going to be abusing your Drill Warriors, which you decided to go with all 3 rather than 2 Drill and like maybe 2 Iron Chains because your Rykos are going to give you access to Iron Chain pretty easily. And then the best card, one copy of Plasma, which I'll kind of let you. I know that's your like bread and butter card.
I like the card. It makes a lot of sense in this deck. With the free tokens that you already generate with Dandy, the ability to recur them with your Drill Warriors, and they also opted to include the Scapegoat to get that extra interaction off of it. I mean, technically, Debris Dragon into Dandy into whatever 7 you choose is technically also Plasma if you need to get it out that way. They have a Fader to synergize with it, so there's a lot of neat interaction. I mean, you could normal summon a monster, then Foolish the Dandy for 3. So there's plenty of ways to make it live.
I think my favorite way here will be quick when you get back like a quick draw or something, or you get back a Dandelion off of Drill Warrior and then pitch it to do the effect, and then you normal summon Shell, and then you just use those 3. You have the 2 tokens in Shell, and then you can go get another Shell and just keep doing it and then refill your hand size. So it's an interesting combo, and it's definitely something that I would consider. I almost feel like because you're playing the Blaze Accelerator in the 3 rockets, you're like almost hurting the ability to summon Plasma, but it obviously worked out getting top 8. But you can even lean more into Plasma if you forego these 4 cards here.
I was gonna say they have a degree of self-control I don't. If I wanted to put Plasma in here, I'd find a way to put Stratos and maybe a Mally or 2 Mally in here or something like that. Good on them for just using the Plasma, and it seems like it probably got them some value.
Yeah. No copies of Road Warrior in the extra deck for that level 8 big monster thing. We have a copy of Twister for Royal Oppression, most likely, so you can continue to do things on the turn that you draw it, especially if you're expecting a Drill Warrior to come back and they Oppression the ability for it to summon itself. We can go ahead and Twister that as we draw it. And
Interesting observation for the extra deck is they didn't include any of the generic sixes like Goyo or Brio, and instead, like you said, maxed out Drill Warrior and also put 2 turbos in instead of just 1.
Which is
Turbo
fairly
Warrior is
common
really good
for the to not play any of the generic like Goyo Brio stuff when you can't make it generically, because you can only make dragons with debris and you can only make synchrons with Quickdraw. So there is no real way to make any of those outside of BrainCon.
Yeah, I guess I just always included one because I didn't want to max out Drill or double Turbo Warrior. So maybe I should take some lessons from this.
I like double Iron Chain just because you have 2 debris dragons, and so that's like the thing that I like to do. But I can understand not wanting to do that, and maybe playing like a Catastor or like a Brio or a Goyo or something.
The last thing I'll say about this is I bet those main deck decrees put in a lot of work today.
Yeah, especially with all of the Blackwing stuff and the trap decks, just to be able to turn off, oppression or anything like that. And because of that, we're not seeing any gores either, which is pretty interesting.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, because we have we have Book as a defensive card, Scapegoat as a semi-defensive card that doesn't get, wrecked by decree. So we do see a couple traps to support it, but typically if we have the decree up, we're probably winning the game as we're moving forward. And when it gets popped, we have a defensive card to get us back into it. So it does make sense. All right, so let's move on to... They have it as... I don't remember what they named it. It wasn't Cat Plant, but we've always just called it Cat Plant.
They called it Saber Plant.
Saber Plant? Okay. So there's... I don't know what it is off this list, but like for some reason there's no monk. Like I feel like my eyes are deceiving me.
No monk and the Rose Warrior, right?
And we see a Rose Warrior, but no monk, and I'm like thoroughly confused. But if it works, it works. We have 2 copies of Tomato, which we can get off Lonefire, which gets into our Sangan, which gets into our cat. It's weird that we can like waterfall downwards to get into like a dark box kind of thing. With that and with like Plague Spreader if we need a tuner or anything like that. So we do have access to it, or even Gale, which is cool to see because you don't see a lot of Gales. Only 1 copy of Debris Dragon. Neospatia and Dark Panther in the main board is pretty interesting, but having access as a non-tuner for Goyo and Brio is pretty cool. I like having that. And then, of course, the Iron Chain because we have the 1 Debris Dragon, so we have to have access with that. Anything you're seeing on this list that you really enjoy?
I mean, the concept in general, I'm happy to see a cat deck do well. I think this is its best placing in an RBET in at least recent memory. There's a lot of the spell and trap lineup is interesting to me too. Though the 1 creature swap, I get it. I wouldn't say it's standard, but I get it. Like you can always rescue cat into Ryko Arabellum and just creature swap the Ryko. And even if you don't kill it, like it'll die anyways.
Yeah, it just dies off of there, and you can give them tomatoes.
Yeah, the 1 bottomless and 1 D prison.
And 1 bribe.
Interesting. Yeah, the 1 bribe is also interesting.
Second one's inside.
Yeah, they sided second bottomless, but not second D prison. So I think they just wanted a wide net of coverage, and obviously it looks like it served them quite well. Wing Blast is, I guess, with the plants and plague and things like that, Wing Blast makes sense as a 1 of inclusion. Certainly wouldn't want more than 1. I am dying to know what that Rose Warrior did for them, though.
And no copies of Cold Wave, which is usually really good with cat.
Yeah, that's the that's the play starter, right? Cold Wave, Monk into cat, into all sorts of fun stuff.
But you notice there's just not enough spells to really support it. We're not seeing no Book of Moon here, none of that stuff. To like no Charge of the Light Brigades. We're only playing 2 Rykos. It's fairly different from what we would typically see out of this deck. I had thought about including Dark Panther in my cat build. I wasn't actually planning on cutting a Raikou or the Charge, but it makes sense to do so if you want to go that route, especially with the copy of Tomatoes. So it is something that I might look at my cat plant list and kind of revise it a little bit and take some notes from these. It is weird to see 2 Airbellum. I think 3 is, you want to have the 3 tuners, but
Right.
because typically you want to go double Airbellum, especially if you're going Monk, but there's no Monk. So it is really cool to see this list do as well as it did with some cards that were thought to be staples that just didn't get any use.
The sideboard has a lot of spell and trap hate.
Yeah.
Double trap, double trap stun, 7 tools, another dark bribe, and technically starlight and anti-spell fragrance. Like they definitely felt their worst enemy was back row.
Also, Aerofalco is the player. If you click on, I'll just profile. Favorite deck, Spirit Control. Goated.
Yeah, love spirits.
Spirit Control, best deck. All right. Next, we're gonna get into Souls Manix. Again, what is it? Top 16, I guess technically.
Yeah.
Top 16, and then there's like top 24. Flamevale control list. It is cool to see Snowman in the main board. I'm gonna hype that card every time.
Favorite card.
It's the best card. Only 5 Flamevale monsters. It is weird to see only 2 magicians. I do get it, but it is interesting. We also see, because you want a lot of level 4s in the deck, typically the deck would play like 3 spies and a guard to go with the triple books, and we're actually seeing 2 Kaikus and 2 Thunder Kings to go with that instead. This is a more proactive play, and it works better going first or second. Spy typically struggles if you're going to go second, especially if your opponent's just going to set a Raikou or sack whatever for a Caius or something, and you're just like so far behind. And honestly, the game's typically over by that point. So I can understand going with this route. I like the Summoner Monk to be able to get both. If you want to be able to like stun your opponent on their turn, you can just Monk for one of these guys, not even worry about attacking, but use them for their prevention effects, whether that's stopping searches or stopping banishes or anything like that. If you don't have a level 8 that you really need to go into, if you want to go for Magician. So
yeah, I'm curious. The main deck Kaikus have me thinking for decks that really need to just prevent Crow from happening to them. Like, I'm just thinking about my Dark Gaia, my Dark Calling Hero, whatever you want to call it deck. Like, if I just need to go off on a turn, I can just normal Kaiku and then do all of my fusions.
And then you don't have to worry about Crow or release or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you're kind of playing 2 ends of the spectrum here with Kaiku, which is kind of cool. I like the one Gale. I think Gale is like maybe like 70-30 in terms of decks that include it versus not. Most will, especially with like BrainCon and all the Blackwings. You could just BrainCon, take something, and then special Gale, and that Gale is free. And then you still have your normal summon. And since you are a fairly normal summon reliant deck, it makes sense. It is a normal summon deck.
I was gonna say I'm surprised to see it here without the spy engine, because that's a fairly easy way to get value out of it. But maybe with Snowman Eaters, it's a good way to get into your 6s outside of Raikou.
Yeah, with like Gale and Snowman.
Yeah, Gale and Snowman. The Snowman has a decent chance of sticking around.
I do like the Compulses. It's chainable removal. This is a very more trap-centric build than what you would see. I don't normally see more than 8 or 9, and we're seeing 11 here. So these are kind of the added additions beyond the standard. Everything else is typically a little standard with triple book. So it is a very defensive deck. So essentially, it's kind of like a Flamevale control deck where you're seeing a grind game until you can resolve Rekindling later in the game. Like Rekindling gets better the later the game gets. So you essentially play anti-meta for the first half of the game, and then you have a blowout card later on in the game when your opponent is out of resources. You don't want to just like Rekindling off the bat. So that is pretty cool. I know Callie and I both really like the card Needle Sealing. Not so much in this format because we just don't see it as often.
No.
But we're seeing 2 needle stealing here. This might be the only deck that sided needle stealing. Everything else obviously makes sense. Second Oppression, Trap Stun, Mind Crush, Dust, Shrink to support your Fire Dogs along with Gale to like reduce attack. My Body makes a lot of sense to stop any of those mass destruction effects or just things that'll blow your stuff up, blow up your guys. Other than that, it's fairly standard, but I think this is a very unique list. Cutting Magician to 2 to eliminate that brick, that extra brick draw.
Yeah, I think this was a very targeted list. Yeah, the Oppression especially still surprises me to play it in this deck.
But when you have so many guys that can do things on their own,
yeah,
like, you can't Oppression a 1900 beater that can get a guy from your deck for free.
Yeah,
and
I see the value.
And
in
even then,
sure.
If you get a Fire Dog, run something over, you can't Oppression and damage them. So you get a Magician. Even if you can't synchro with that, if they eventually remove that Oppression, you have 2 cards in your graveyard, like 2 Flame Bells.
Yeah.
You've already got them out of your deck and where they need to be, so that does make sense. In terms of, we just want to bring this up because we're not really, we don't know the OTK. We know there is a combo that OTKs. I feel like the deck can almost win by like decking your opponent out by blocking over and over and over again. Essentially, you can normal summon Substitoad, special summon Exodius, put your whole deck back, tribute it, put them back in the graveyard, and set up the dupe block. And if once your 2 dupes die, special Exodus, normal summon Substitoad, put your whole deck back, and you just keep doing it over and over and over again. And
yeah, I know.
With triple salvage.
The whole point of this deck is to stall out until you can OTK. I just don't remember what that OTK combo is.
And then Iron Wall keeps your guys from getting crowed and things like that. And it also keeps Exod like from getting banished when you tribute it. So it's infinite in that way because Exod banishes, or Exodius.
Exodius,
yeah. It banishes itself when it leaves the field. But if you have Iron Wall and you sack it off with Substitoad, it'll go to the graveyard, and then when you special summon the second one, it'll go back to your deck, and you can never deck out.
I'm curious what the side deck strategy in this is too. The side deck's very interesting. And it's hard to judge the side deck without really knowing what the main deck does, but like an Oppression in this strategy seems unique. The decrees make perfect sense. Everything makes perfect sense to me except for that Oppression. I just don't know enough about how this deck functions. Maybe that's when you side in the other Des Frog and you just beat.
Because you can obviously, because everything is water, just about. So other than like the 1 Dandelion, and then these guys, but you can't. I mean, you can't synchro with these; they're too big. But you could just you have triple blaster to synchro with all of your guys, and it's super easy to get to them because you have triple moray and triple salvage. And so even with the Exodus like loop ending, you end it by like tributing. You can salvage back your guy that you want first, grab your Substitoad, and then special Exod, put everything back. Normal the Substitoad you just grabbed, and you're off and rolling again.
I'd be curious to learn more about this deck strategy. It's certainly unique, especially in the top 24 here.
So Frog Slicer, if you're here, down below, my guy. And then Cadigan's Jank Corner is the one Salvo Dad deck that played. I actually pulled this one though because it had this card, which why? It's so awesome. Like this is, I mean, it's a huge monster. So like drawing it, I don't know. It's just really cool. But you have Future Fusion, which can dump Blowback and Barrel Dragons, which allow you to summon Gatling Dragon with Overload and Future Fusion, so you have to play 2 for this. You have your Cyber Twin Dragon, which you can summon off Future Fusion by sending both of these. You have your Over Dragons for Overload because it's dark. You have obviously the Machina package because they're all machines, which means you can like pitch Barrel Dragon if you draw it. You could just pitch Barrel Dragon for Fortress, and it is level 7 or whatever, so like you're never tribute summoning it is going to be really, really difficult, so it's literally there to be food for Fortress. If it was only level 8 and it could revive Fortress, only 2 and 2 on the Salvo engine, but it seems like super high roll, kind of fun.
Oh yeah. This is spiritually similar to me to like the Jinzo OTK decks.
Like Genzo
You,
Returner and stuff.
yeah, like you have like a few combos that can completely blow people out of the water in a fun, unique way.
It's almost worth like getting like gold sarking for like one of these two, the fusion spells and like or limiter, and just like trying to use these three cards to just end the game as quickly as possible, which is quite comical if you can actually do it. But I did want to highlight the one Salvo Dad deck that that did well, or that was played. I know I know it got eliminated before top 24 that they cut to, but it is still cool nonetheless, and something worth highlighting. We all try it. If you post your list after a tournament in a Discord, one of us is likely to see it and be like, "That's the jank corner."
Yeah. I didn't have a jank corner this time because my jank actually made it into the top 24, which is wild.
Yeah, you right here and Tristan. You want to talk about Tristan's list for a second? Maybe talk about a couple differences.
Yeah, we're putting out the deck profile for my deck that kind of goes into details of my choices tomorrow. But just to highlight the differences, Tristan opted for more of a. They went for more Miracle Synergy with the Aqua Dolphin. In addition to the discard traps with 2 Raigeki breaks, it's a more aggressive build than mine, I should say, with the increased fusion count, the giant Trunade to help secure those pushes, the Trag, and the Raigeki breaks, and the magical cylinder to both push for damage and protect your stuff. So overall, I think the difference is less in the card choices and more in the play style. But we both did very well with a deck, but there's surprising differences in there. I can't speak much more to how they played the deck other than how I can see the deck choices are, but if I had to classify it differently, mine is more either control or probably tempo mid-range, whereas Tristan's is probably more on the aggressive side.
Because we have 3 Miracle Fusions.
Which I think is your preference too, right?
Yeah, you just want to see that card. So it is what it is. I think we're going to start seeing more upstarts in this, and we're going to start seeing the deck start to move and every card be able to do something. But we talked plenty about that. You'll hear plenty of that tomorrow. Let me know what you guys think. If there's any, I apologize to the hat community. I know they had a tournament this weekend as well, but I think this kind of takes precedence having 197 players. We just really wanted to talk about it, so we wanted to spend as much time as we could on it and actually, really, dive into it. But apologies to them, and then thanks for watching, guys.